everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I will be sharing Lincoln's birth story with you guys. He was born on February 10th, 2018 at 4:40 in the morning. And in my last video, which I can link below, I shared my experience with preeclampsia and my induction that had failed. So we were sent home from the hospital on Tuesday because of that induction. And I had normal days on Wednesdays and Thursdays, but then Friday came and I woke up feeling a little off, and I took my blood pressure, and again it was super high. Definitely in the range to call the doctor. So I decided I'm just going to lay down and take it easy for an hour and I'll check it again. I do that, it's still really high. I say, okay, well let me try it again, let me just lay down and I'll check it again. Just because I know every time in the past it had been high in the morning, and then as the afternoon went on, it would go down. So I didn't want to rush off to the hospital just to have the blood pressure go down again. So I said, okay, I'll just rest for another hour and I'll check it again. And when it was still high, I decided I'm not going to risk it. I'll just call the doctor and see what they say. I call and they tell me to go to the hospital immediately. They didn't even have me wait to talk to the actual doctor. The woman who answered the phone just told me to just go right away. I'll tell the doctor. We'll let the hospital know you're coming. So I grab my bags and I head off. My mom takes me this time because Patrick was working, and I told him like what was happening, and I said if anything comes of this, if they admit me, I'll let you know and you can come. So Mom takes me. We go to triage and they take my blood pressure there, and it's totally normal again. And I'm like, I knew it. I knew that this would happen. And the doctor that was on the hospital that day, he called and talked to my actual doctor. And together they decided that they were going to admit me. He comes in and he tells me this, and he says that I will not be leaving without a baby. So I'm admitted. I call Patrick. He comes. And it's now towards the afternoon, and their first action is Cervidil again, which I talked a lot about in my last video. So I was a little hesitant when they said that, like, oh geez, I have to go through this again. So they put it in 2 hours of not moving, and then I was looking towards another 10 hours of waiting to see if this would work. Well, it did. So I started feeling contractions, where the last induction, they said I was having contractions, but I never actually felt them. These ones I felt. It started off not so bad, but I had a horrible, horrible headache that was not going away. And they kept offering me medication. I kept turning them down. And finally around 9 o'clock or so, I said, okay, let's just do this. I was already starting to feel contractions, and I didn't want pain on both sides. So they gave me, and I wish I would have written down what it was. They gave me something through my IV, and the second it started going in, I had a horrible reaction to it. I don't know if these were normal side effects, but I did not like them. The whole room started spinning. I started feeling like unbelievably hot, yet I had the chills at the same time, and I felt so sick, horribly sick. And the contractions keep getting worse and worse and worse. And Patrick was not doing well. At this point, we knew something was wrong with him, but we didn't know what. He hadn't really gone to the doctor after the first ER visit, which I will talk about all of this in another video. But at this point, he was not feeling well at all. Most of his problems were his back pains. And he did have a lot of stomach pains as well. So he was kind of out. He was on the little chair recliner that they had there, watching TV as best he could and falling asleep, and he was in not good shape. So he wasn't very helpful to me while I was in labor. He wasn't telling me, in the movies or other stories you'll hear about the guy telling you when the contraction's starting and when it's ending and all that, but he just couldn't do it. So to me, they didn't feel very regular. I didn't think they were evenly spaced out at all. They seemed kind of random, and it was getting worse and worse pain-wise. A pain I just can't even describe, and each contraction seemed to last forever. And then it wouldn't be that long, and then I'd have another one, and it was awful. And around 3 o'clock in the morning, I just couldn't do it anymore, and I asked for that epidural. And that process took a little bit longer than I expected. They had a ton of people come in the room, and they had me sit on the edge of the bed and hunch over, and in the meantime, I'm having horrible contractions throughout all this, so I'm moaning and groaning, and they keep asking me if it's pain from the needle, or do I feel this, but it worked, and I started feeling better. I lay down, and the midwife comes in, and she checks me, and she tells me that she feels something weird, and that she's going to go get the ultrasound because she's not sure what that is. So I'm extremely concerned. This is my first baby. I've never been through this. You're an experienced midwife, and you don't know what that is, and it feels weird. Like, no one in labor wants to hear that from a medical professional. So I was a little nervous, to put it lightly. And she comes back in with the ultrasound machine, and the baby is breech. And she goes and she tells the doctor that was on. So this is a doctor that told me that I won't be leaving here without a baby. He's not associated with the practice that I've been going to. He's associated with hospital. He comes in and he tells me that they see on the ultrasound that the baby is breech and that I need to have a C-section. Which immediately I say, okay. And I think I was supposed to be more upset by this because he kept saying, do you know what that means? Do you understand? And explaining the process of a C-section. And yes, I know what it means. It means you're going to cut me. And he's like, no, we don't like to use that term. We're going to make an incision. Like, okay, fine. Either way, you're going to cut me open and you're going to pull the baby out. Okay, let's just do this. I wasn't really upset about this because on Monday when I had gone to the doctor because of my appointment, but also with my high blood pressure, and when he sent me to the hospital, he told me that a C-section is a likely option in case my cervix wouldn't open, if my blood pressure kept going up and they weren't able to induce me, that a C-section may be the best, safest way to get the baby out. So I had a week to kind of prepare my mind for this, and I was okay with it. I was not attached to having a vaginal birth. I was perfectly fine with a C-section. In my mind, whatever gets the baby here the safest for him and for me, then let's do it. And if that's the best way, then that's the best way, and I was okay with that. And then there was some discussion between the doctor and nurses about who to do a C-section first. Apparently there was another woman in labor who needed a C-section as well, who had been waiting, but the doctor said that they wanted me to go first. So I guess my situation was a little more serious. They didn't really explain that to me. It's just something I overheard. So they get Patrick some scrubs and they get him ready, and they wheel me into the OR, and they put me on the operating table. It was a teeny tiny little table, and they put the curtain above, and I had my arms stretched out like this, and I wasn't supposed to move, and they adjusted the medication from my epidural to a different type of medication, a spinal block. They didn't have to do any new needles or anything like that, which I appreciated. And that was a weird feeling, probably the weirdest sensation I've ever had. When you go to the dentist and you have Novocaine and your mouth is numb and you're like patting it and you can tell that you're touching it, like you can feel that someone's touching you, but you can't feel it at the same time. That weird, awkward feeling. It was like that from like my chest down, and it was crazy. And they kept like poking me and prodding me, and do you feel this? Do you feel that? Do you feel this? And I was like, well, kind of, but no. It's odd. I can't. That's the best way that I can explain it. And finally Patrick comes in and he sits by my head and holds my hand, and I start like shaking uncontrollably, like I cannot stop it. And there was a male nurse there who told me, don't worry about it, this is totally normal. He got me some nice really warm blankets and draped them over my arms and my chest, and they started the operation. And I could feel the moment that they pulled Lincoln out of me. It was a literal weight lifted off of my chest. It was the weirdest, again, I'm saying this a lot, it was a really strange sensation, but like the coolest thing too. And the doctor pulls him out and says how huge he is. They keep remarking on how big the baby is. And a lot of the nurses kept saying, oh, it was a double footling breech. It was double footling. Oh, it was a double footling. Which means that he was both feet first together. And by the way that they were talking about it and like all excited about it, I guess it's not very common. I don't know. They just seemed really excited by the fact that he was a double footling breech. And the doctor kept remarking on how big he was and how big his head was, how huge his head was. And he said to me that he didn't think, if he had not been breech and I just tried to do a vaginal birth, he didn't think he would have fit because of how big his head was. And so they are working on me and closing me up or doing whatever they have to do, and I'm still laid out. And I had expected from movies and other birth stories that other people have shared, like I kind of expected them to lift the baby up for me to see him above the curtain, or to bring him around over to me so I could give him like a little kiss before they take him to clean him up. But it wasn't like that at all. He was not crying at all, and there was a bunch of nurses from the NICU there to care for the baby, which they do for every C-section. They always send some nurses from the NICU to be there in case of any issues. And he was not crying at all when they pulled him out, and he was handed right over to them, and they took him off, and he was off to my left, so I could see them over there, but there were so many women around him, I couldn't even see him over there. And what happens after a baby is born is they do the APGAR test. They score him, and they're scored on, let me double check this to get it right. So it's the physical condition of a newborn, and they rate him from either 0, 1, or 2 on 5 different things. So heart rate, respiratory, so breathing, muscle tone, response to stimulation, and their skin coloration. And they rate them 1 minute after birth, and that is to see how well the baby went through with the birthing, how they did with labor. And then they rate them again, same thing, same score, like same categories, 5 minutes after birth. And his APGAR score at 1 minute was only 5. So this is 5 out of 10, so it was really low. And he wasn't breathing, and so they were working on him, and I had no idea what was going on. No one was saying anything to me. All that anyone was saying was, oh, he was a double footling breech, and he was big. That's a huge baby. Look how big that baby is. That's all that they were saying. And I just kind of want to be like, shut up and tell me what's wrong. Like, something's wrong. He's not crying. Like, why isn't he crying? What are you doing? Like, why, like, y'all are hanging out over there and I can't even see him. And I was very worried. And I'm just sitting there, laying there, spread eagle, and I can't do anything. I can't move. I can't move my arms. I can't move. And I'm just like crying, like I can't stop crying. The emotions are just so overwhelming. Like, nothing prepares you for the way that you feel when you have a baby, whether it's vaginal or C-section. Like, nothing prepares you for that. So his APGAR score was a 1, or no, sorry, at 1 minute after birth was a 5. And then 5 minutes after birth, he scored an 8, which is a lot better. So 8 out of 10 is pretty good. So he was doing a whole lot better. And once they kind of got him stabilized and doing okay, Patrick was allowed to go over and see him. And then they weighed him, and they weighed him a lot closer to me so I can actually see the scale. And he was 9 pounds and 7.8 ounces. So 9 pounds, 8 ounces. Huge baby. They measure him 20 inches, and they measure his head, which the doctor again kept remarking about how big his head was. And it was 39 centimeters. And they're telling me all of this, and I have no frame of reference for head sizes. I know that my head's kind of big because hats don't really fit me, but that's all. Like, 39 centimeters, okay, I don't know what that means. And later, when I had my phone and I'm laying in bed recovering, I look it up with the percentiles, because that I can understand. And he was in the 98th percentile for weight, and he was in the 100th percentile for head size. So yeah, big head. He had a big head. But he was so cute. He was so cute. He was just the cutest baby I had ever seen. And once they had finished with me, and that process took a whole lot longer than I thought. And it could just be that I was just so anxious to hold him and see him that it just seemed like it took forever, but it's that it really felt like it took forever. And they finally give him to me. They get me onto a new hospital bed, and then they hand him to me, and I got to hold him as they wheeled me into recovery, which is literally the room right next door. And they have me do skin to skin there with him, and they have me feed him. And some of the NICU nurses followed us in, and they were really concerned about his size, about how big he was. And it's a concern when they're that big that they're not regulating their sugars. So after they had me feed him, they checked his blood sugar. At that point, right after birth, he should have been somewhere in the 60 to 80 range from what they explained to me, and he was at a 32. So they immediately took him away and took him to the NICU and told us that we could go down and check on him in about an hour or two. Well, that Patrick could go check on him in an hour or two because I was still recovering from surgery, from major stomach surgery. So we're in recovery for a little bit, and then they bring me up to the maternity. Before surgery, they had put in a catheter. Was it before or after? I don't remember. At some point, they had me on a catheter. So I'm laying in bed, and they put these boot things on my legs that, like, I don't even know, it seemed pretty frequently. It felt like every 5-10 minutes. They would kind of puff up with air and stuff, and it's to prevent blood clots. So I had that, and I had a catheter, and I'm laying in bed, and I was going to be there for a while in recovering. And the nurses come in every so often, and they check your vitals. So they'll check your blood pressure and your pulse ox, and they'll check your temperature. And when they checked my temperature the one time, it was above 100. It wasn't even that high of a temperature, but because it was over 100, I was not allowed to go to the NICU. And this is like right around the time where I was like, they were going to let me go down. They were going to wheel the hospital bed down so I could see him. But because I had spiked a temperature, I was no longer allowed, and I would have to wait 24 hours after my fever broke. Are you kidding? I just had a baby and I'm not allowed to see him. He's in the NICU and I'm not allowed to see him. I was so upset. I was so upset. But the nurses were wonderful, and I could call and get updates on him. Patrick was able to go down after a certain time period just because they wanted to get him stabilized and get him all ready. So he was able to go down and see him.
Wise men say only fools rush in, but I can't help falling in love with you. Oh, shall I stay? Would it be a sin? Oh, if I can't help falling in love with you. Like a river flows surely to the sea, darling, so it goes. Some things are meant to be. Take my hand, take my whole life too. Oh, for I can't help falling in love with you. Oh, like a river flows.
They're like very active. For him, even when he was sleeping, his respiration every now and then not consistent. If it's consistent, that would have been another issue. He would breathe like anywhere from 60s to 90s a minute. So we wanted below 60.